Hi, I'm Guy Powell, and welcome to the next episode of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. If you haven't already done so, please visit Guy Powell and sign up for more episodes. I am the author of the new book, The Only Witness, a historical fiction tracing a possible history of the Shroud over the last 2 millennia. Today, we'll be speaking with Dr. Brian Donley Worrell, and he is a PhD chemist. So let me tell you a little bit about Brian. He is a former Fortune 500 VP with a strong background in chemistry, internet technology, business development, and blockchain technology. With a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry, much of his postgraduate work focused in the disparate areas of various technologies and biblical sciences, culminating with his PhD in biblical studies. In 2022, Dr. Worrell and Dr. Stevenson. Dr. Stevenson is an original member of the STIRP team. They co-authored a book entitled The Shroud of Turin, The Perfect Summary. The book has been translated into several languages and is available in English, Hebrew, Italian, and Spanish. The book and a number of amazing materials are available for free at their website. Please be sure to visit their site at www.theshroudofturin.org, www.theshroudofturin.org, and get your free copy of The Shroud of Turin, The Perfect Summary. So with that, welcome, Brian. It's so good to have you.
Thank you, Guy. Good to see you, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I thought one thing I wanted to mention as well. I did want to kind of read the dedication to the book, and I thought that might be interesting. And here it is. I never thought I would have the opportunity and the honor of working with Dr. Stevenson in helping to create this book. Nearly everything I know about the Shroud of Turin I learned from Ken, drawing upon his nearly 50 years of expertise and research. It was less of an effort and more of a pleasure to work with him in writing this summary of the extensive research, designing and implementing collateral websites, and developing associated resources. So, Brian, tell us a little bit about your backstory. So, how did you get involved in the Shroud of Turin, and then how did you get involved with working with Dr. Stevenson?
Well, again, thank you very much, Guy, for having me aboard today. I can't tell you what a pleasure and an honor it is to be aboard with you today. And before I answer that question, I do want to just echo something you stated earlier. I want to congratulate you personally on your book, The Only Witness, A History of the Shroud of Turin. I understand it's a bestseller on Amazon, so congratulations for that. You should be duly applauded for that. And
Thank you.
I also had the chance to see your entire interview with Nancy Grace, and I've loved Nancy Grace and been a fan of her for many years. So kudos to you and that, Guy. Congratulations.
Yeah, Nancy and I go back quite a few years, and I was really surprised. She reached out to me a couple of days before the launch and says, "Guy, I'd like to interview you about your book." And I was totally surprised, but also incredibly blessed. She is just a great friend and a great Christian, and it was so much fun to actually be on her show.
Yes, great, great. So to answer your first question, a little about my backstory and how I became involved with the Shroud of Turin in general. I would say I first heard of the Shroud of Turin, I'm sure when I was a child or a young teenager. And at that time, it sounded like one of those things that you're not quite sure if it's real, but you want to know more about it. However, at that time, Guy, as you know, we really did not have the level of scientific expertise and experience which had taken the shroud upon its own investigation. We didn't have the chance to really get more scientific data, et cetera, because at that time, none of it existed. So fast forward a few years, as I went through graduate school and was studying for my doctorate in biblical studies, I was again confronted or came across more information on the Shroud of Turin. And by happenstance, I happened to be placed in touch with Dr. Kenneth E. Stevenson. During my studies for my doctorate, one of the administrators at the school said, Brian, we know that you're in the Fortune 500, you do a lot of writing, and we have this book that one of our students wrote, and we'd really like you to take a look at it and give us some input. Let us know what you think. The book is called, in fact, I actually have the book right here. The book is called Nazar, White Linen and the Blood of Sprinkling by Dr. Kenneth E. Stevenson. So I took a look at the book, read through everything, and I was just completely blown away by it. In doing so, that was when I was placed in touch with Dr. Stevenson, my very good friend, Kenneth Stevenson, and we have been very close friends, allies, and co-workers ever since then. So that's how I actually came to meet Dr. Stevenson.
Yeah, fantastic. And yeah, and I read Nazar, and I've also read the other book, The Perfect Summary, and they are really a good contribution to what's going on in the shroud world today. And then with Nazar, certainly also combining faith with the shroud and other important messages about what the shroud and what Christ absolutely means for all of us. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so tell us now, so what is The Perfect Summary? What's that book all about?
The Perfect Summary. Well, to take sort of half a step back, when I reviewed the Nazar book and became friends with Dr. Stevenson, I believe that was his fourth book on the Shroud of Turin at the time. I stress that because he is literally one of the world's leading foremost experts on the Shroud of Turin. In 1978, a group of scientists banded together and were actually granted permission to have hands-on access to and hands-on opportunity to evaluate and scientifically analyze the Shroud of Turin for a total of about 5 days nonstop, working around the clock. And Ken was one of those individuals. The team was called the Shroud of Turin Research Project, or STURP for short, in 1978. This team consisted of a number of individuals from NASA, from Jet Propulsion Laboratory, from the United States Air Force, and a number of top-notch organizations, very highly respected individuals. I mention that because many people, for some reason, tend to assume that this was some group of Christians who got together and somehow got permission or granted permission to view and analyze the Shroud of Turin. And that simply is not the case. The fact of the matter is the vast majority of the people on that Shroud of Turin research project in 1978 were actually not Christian, the vast majority of them. And again, that's neither good nor bad. I'm just sharing that so that people know this was not some kind of one-sided, biased informational objective. So that's what we've done with the Shroud of Turin. And
yeah, and you're right. So very much so about the Shroud of Turin research project, STURP, and the team of scientists that went over there. They were truly scientists, and now certainly some of them were Christian, some of them were Jewish. Barry Schwartz was
absolutely,
Jewish.
my friend
Some of them
Barry
were
Schwartz,
atheists,
yes.
and and it's pretty surprising that they were able to put together such an esteemed group of scientists, but also of different faith backgrounds, which I think helped overall to really understand the meaning of the shroud and everything that they were able to do with the shroud as they were studying it. And to your
Yes,
point as well, in 1978, when that took place, I do remember that happening very vaguely. Maybe it was a Time magazine or a Life magazine article that I read, and and you kind of, I I don't know, I kind of put that away and said, "Wow, that's kind of interesting." Didn't know that it even existed, and yet here they were, these scientists going over and studying that. And then to your point, Dr. Ken Stevenson, he was one of the original members of that STURP team.
yes, indeed, indeed. You had also asked about the book which Ken and I co-authored recently, and the book is entitled, as you mentioned, The Shroud of Turin, The Perfect Summary. And the background for this book is such that Ken and I really wanted to put together a book that was, I guess the average person would consider it more easy reading type of material. In other words, a person would not feel intimidated if they don't have a strong background in science or in scripture or in history. The book is written more from the standpoint of the everyday man just kind of telling a story to another person and sharing the information.
Yeah, and I thought that was very good when I read it, and I will admit it was about a month or so, maybe more ago, when we first started talking, and I thought that was it made a lot of sense, and it really did target not just the devout Christian or the devout Catholic. It really did seem like it was toward the more general audience. Things were put into terms that made sense, that anybody could read and then and associate it with it, and then potentially, which I think is maybe the most important thing, is to ask more questions. So they would
Yes,
want to ask more questions. Well, what is this shroud? How can that be? What is that? Where did that image come from? And I thought it
absolutely.
was a masterful job. And plus, you also have a very unique way in that you're selling it. So tell us about that.
Yes, the book is actually not for sale. We give it away completely for free. Anyone who wants to get a copy of the book, you only have to go to our website, which is www.theshroudofturin, TURIN.org/free book, FREEBOOK. You just go to that web page and the book is available completely for free. You don't pay for any shipping or handling, and the book is available currently in English, in Italian, Spanish, or the Hebrew languages. We're in the process now, Guy, of converting the book and translating it into additional languages as well. So you will be hearing more about that in the future.
Absolutely. Well, definitely let me know about that. And if you do one in German, I spent quite a few years in Germany, and would be able to help you maybe with the at least some of the proofreading or something like that. So
Ah, sprechen Sie Deutsch?
ich spreche, yeah,
Nein.
absolutely. Actually, it's funny. I was just on another call this morning with a gentleman from Germany, and I got to warm up my German. It was a little bit difficult, but nevertheless, I was able to talk to him a little bit about the shroud in German. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's
So
great.
yeah, so let's stay with the perfect summary. Now, you mentioned it's kind of for the everyday person. It's not specific towards one type of person or another one. What do you want them to come away with after they've read that?
I think the biggest thing I want people to come away with when they read The Shroud of Turin, the perfect summary, is I want them to feel that they have been provided specific factual data, which is what we encompass within the book. You know, everything in the book is has been scientifically proven, and the book also focuses upon tying together, or I should really say, showing how tightly history, science, and the scripture are all actually very much aligned with respect to the Shroud of Turin. You know, we have the research from the Shroud of Turin Research Project. Much of that research is heavily quoted within the book, but again, these are internationally renowned top level scientists doing every kind of research and analysis that you can think of on this cloth. I mean, x-rays, spectrometry, everything you can think of was done to this cloth, and they were able to take that data and say, hey, we've actually learned a lot about this cloth. The cloth itself is a piece of linen. It's about 14 and a half feet long, about 3.5 feet wide, and it has been around since, about 2,000 years or so. You know, we even include a lot of scientific data, again, from a scientific team. So this is not, this is what I want to believe, this is what you want to believe, this is hearsay. No, we included fact from the scientific team, which actually does a very effective job of shooting down a lot of misinformation and also disinformation, which people intentionally provide, especially regarding the aging of the Shroud of Turin itself.
Yeah, which brings up maybe the next question. So, 1978 was when STIRP took place. It took a couple of years for them to release their reports. It became pretty widespread that the knowledge about the shroud more or less moved out of just Italy, but now more worldwide. Then 1988 happened, and so how do you handle 1988 with what I bring up there is the dating, the
Sure.
radiocarbon dating or the carbon 14 dating, whatever terminology you want to use. Tell us how you discuss that in the book.
We discuss it from a very factual standpoint. Okay, we keep a lot of opinion out of it, but we give the actual facts which have been recorded scientifically. Guys, you know, my undergrad degree is in chemistry, and as a scientist, I have to go on a little bit of a rant here, I guess, but as a scientist, one of the things to which the standard to which we are held is everything must be honest and reproducible. In other words, you don't take data and you don't try to perform an experiment that cannot be reproduced, or perform an experiment where you're taking only part of the data, or you're utilizing a product or a substance which you know is not honestly representative of the overall substance. And that is the main point for the carbon-14 dating. Guys, I'm sure you already know, when the carbon-14 dating was done, a little snippet of the Shroud of Turin was taken, a little cloth snippet, and performed radiocarbon dating on it. And the carbon dating came back and said, well, it looks like this piece of linen is at the oldest from the Middle Ages, sometime from around 1230 to 1390, I think it was. AD.
Yeah, 1260 to 1390,
1260 to
exactly.
1390, right?
Exclamation point. You can't forget the exclamation point.
Exactly. And so when one sees that information, one assumes, oh, look, those first group of international scientists, they all bungled it. Not likely, but they all bungled it, and somehow this piece of linen is only dated back to the 1290, 1300 time frame. Well, let's take a look at what was actually done. The Shroud of Turin, as I mentioned, is a piece of linen cloth, okay, 14.5 by about 3.5 feet wide. And when that sample was taken, they, in my humble opinion, but I'm sure I'm correct on this, as in the opinion of many others, they did not take a representative sample of the overall fabric. The fabric that was taken, or the sample was taken, from the very bottom edge, and a very small part of the cloth or the linen was cut off. Now, here's the problem with that. Here's kind of how I explain it so that people can kind of better visualize it. You know, a cloth, pretty much any cloth that you have is going to be sort of woven. If you look at my fingers, there's, you're going to have some threads going north-south, if you will, and other threads going east-west. So they're all woven together, okay? Now, if you have, let's say, a large piece of fabric or a blanket or anything, think about what happens to the edges of a blanket. What happens? Over time, it starts to get frayed, doesn't it? You start to have a lot of threads that start missing or being torn or ripped. And if you don't do something to address that, what's going to happen? Well, that entire piece of fabric is going to start to unravel or start to come apart, starting at the ends of it. This is just common sense. That's not grand science. That's just common sense. So what was done with the Shroud of Turin is cotton fibers were used and rewoven in with the actual linen fibers. They did a masterful job of it as well. It was woven in such a fashion that it would not be extremely easy to see. But again, that is the area of the sample that was taken. So here's what actually happened with the radiocarbon dating, scientifically speaking. A very poor and non-representative sample was taken from the bottom edge of the cloth. That sample, according to the scientists who did this experiment, was a sample of the Shroud of Turin linen. Not exactly true. In fact, completely untrue. It contains some of the linen fibers, but Guy, what happens when you start to weave other fibers in with those fibers, like in that crisscross fashion that I mentioned? What happens when you weave other fibers in so that those fibers don't continue to unravel? What happens is you get a mixture of the original linen fibers mixed in with the cotton fibers that were used when that reweaving was done. In fact, the entire process is called invisible reweaving. So when you take a sample from that area, you're getting a sample that is completely flawed and not representative of the overall linen garment. So what actually happened with that? What happens is they take a flawed sample, they run carbon dating on it, and they say, oh, look, it shows this sample, the Shroud of Turin is really dated to about 1260 to 1390. It's right in that area. and see, this cannot possibly be the shroud 2,000 years old from Jesus Christ. Well, what actually happened was, when you take a sample which consists of linen threads intermingled and mixed with cotton fibers, guess what you're going to get? You're going to get a date somewhere between the age of the older linen fibers and the age of the newer cotton fibers. So that's why you get that mixture in there. I mean, I can tell you a number of other studies which have been done and which show that, for example, there have been several threads taken from that sample, and they've shown where even one thread on that sample, one end of that thread, the dating will be around 14 or 1500 AD, but the other end of that same thread, the dating is about 2,000 years old. And as we know, that's not possible unless you have two different substances woven together in that thread. So that's the story with the carbon-14 dating.
Yeah, and actually, there's a handful of other things that went wrong. You know, to your point about, as a scientist, you have to provide reproducible, valid results, and they have to withstand scrutiny by other scientists.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that was kind of interesting, and it was in 2002 with Tristan Casabianca, is he actually then got the results, the individual results that were summarized in the 1260 to 1390 exclamation point. And he actually got the individual results from each of the three labs and determined that they didn't do their statistics right.
Exactly.
And I work with statistics just about every day right now in my day job, so to speak. And you know, you can flub the data, but if you can at least make sure that your statistics are right, well, you can't flub the data. You have the data, you have the statistics, and both of them have to be correct. You can't just
Absolutely.
flub, you know, one or the other and expect to get a result that's reproducible and withstand scrutiny. And you know, and that's kind of what happened here. And it took, you know, another 10 or 15 years before that was finally brought to light, that there was I don't know if you'd call it unscrupulous, probably unscrupulous activities that took place in the three labs that provided the dating that you went through.
Very much so. When quote unquote scientists twist their statistics that way, we call it statistics instead of statistics. So you can use that one. They performed a lot of statistics on that one.
I've got to remember that. That's pretty good. Yeah. So you know, and it's funny that well, not funny, but the impact that had, and I don't think you mentioned this in the book, but the impact that had on the study of the shroud really put a huge damper on it. All of a sudden, it was 1988. You know, people are interested in, obviously, the radiocarbon dating. That at the time was believed to be the most important thing. And it really, because of that, because of the reputation or the expected results that were going to come out of that, it just put an enormous damper on study of the shroud, when every other study that was done on the shroud basically said it's somewhere from 2,000 years ago, maybe
Yes.
plus or minus with some error. And so that everything else really reflected exactly where you would expect it to be if it was the burial shroud of Jesus Christ. And yet then everybody saw this radiocarbon dating, and it really just put a fly in the ointment in a big way for the study of the shroud.
Yeah, in my opinion, and I hope no one sues me for this, but I don't care. I said the words "in my opinion," but I'm right on this one. That had to have been done intentionally. I mean, as a scientist, and speaking as a scientist, trust me, we know better. We know better than to do things like that. We know better than to take a clearly non-representative sample. We know not to do these things. And when it is shown to us that, hey, this is incorrect, as a true scientist, what we're supposed to do is what? Republish and say, oops, there was a mistake made. It turns out this actually is not from 1260 to 1390. Turns out it's actually from, about 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. And it's also a shame. It's not only the scientists, but it's also the publication. I think it was Science Magazine, or I don't remember which one it was now, but Science Magazine, or that actually published the results, and they are unwilling to retract that statement, even though now it's been proven that there was some skullduggery or something going on that was not quite right. So and it is really a shame. The good news is, though, that's now past us. It's behind us. And, everything that I see, and including your book and my book, both your The Shroud of Turin, The Perfect Summary, awesome book, and then also the Nazar book, which we'll talk about in a second. All of those books now are really one of many to really bring back and get people very motivated to want to study and understand more about the enormous mysteries that are wrapped up in that shroud.
Absolutely. And you and I just spoke for a few minutes about the carbon dating, but there are so many other facets of the testing that has been done on the Shroud of Turin, which flat out proves this garment is about 2,000 years old. I should say this fabric is about 2,000 years old. They were tape samples, sticky tape samples taken from some of the actual main centralized areas of the shroud. And when those samples were analyzed, they clearly found traces of pollen and different remnants of plant life, of plants which only bloomed in Jerusalem around that time of the year. So, it's very interesting indeed. There's so many facts that need to come out to the public.
And I think that's one of the most important ones, is the pollen study, and making sure and seeing that if this is a medieval fake, then how could it have pollen from Jerusalem and potentially even pollen from Turkey?
From Turkey.
And then how could a forger actually be that good? How would they have been that good in the 1300s, 1400s, when this fake was supposed to have come from the radiocarbon dating?
Exactly. There's also a number of theories which people have brought forth to say, oh, this thing is a fake. Every one of those theories has been scientifically disproven. So I want people to understand more than anything that, when you hear myself or Guy Powell talking about this, we're talking about hard scientific data. So we're talking about fact, as opposed to here's what I believe, or here's what this other person believes, etc.
And to your point, reproducible and withstand scrutiny of other scientists.
Absolutely.
And those two pieces, all of those studies, whether it was the pollen study or any of the other ones, and there's a bunch of them that we could talk about, each one of those can withstand scientific scrutiny by other scientists, and then is repeatable. And that's then why those are so valuable towards really getting closer to be able to say that this is what we believe is the burial cloth of Jesus Christ. Yes. So let's shift gears a little bit. I know you want to talk about the book Nazar, and so tell us a little bit about that. What does the word Nazar mean?
Well, that is one of the best questions that anyone can actually ask about the book. What does the word Nazar mean? In order to truly explain it, I want to take just half a step back and kind of come back to it. But I want to give people just a little bit of background about the Hebrew language. I have studied Hebrew and taken classes in Hebrew. My Hebrew is not excellent at this time, but I have studied the language, and Hebrew in itself is really a very fascinating language. I mean, let's think about it for a minute. As we all know, human beings have communicated from, let's say, from the beginning at some point. But when we first started communicating with each other, we didn't have books. We certainly didn't have, iPads or anything. We didn't have books. We didn't have writing. We didn't have tablets. So before we even were carving any kind of pictures or letters or alphabets, what did we do? We typically spoke to each other, and we used a lot of hand gestures. So, the language really began with people just sort of making sounds with each other. And at some point, those sounds became pictures, and we'd start to draw pictures of things. And at some point, it was decided, it kind of makes sense if we have an alphabet. So from there, the alphabet was devised, and of course we use the letters in the alphabet to form words, etc. No surprise there. Hebrew is very interesting because let's compare it to the English language for just a moment, if we could. The English language has, the alphabet has 26 letters in the English alphabet. There are 22 in the Hebrew alphabet. But in the English alphabet, every let we have what are called letters, A, B, C, etc. Well, in the Hebrew alphabet, there are letters, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, etc. In the English alphabet, every letter has a name of the letter and it has a symbol. A capital A we kind of draw like this. So there's a letter, there's a symbol. Same thing in the Hebrew alphabet. But here's where the Hebrew alphabet really gets a little more interesting. In addition to those standard letters and letter names and symbols for each letter, every letter in the Hebrew alphabet also has a pictograph associated with it, an actual picture associated with every letter. In addition, every letter in the Hebrew alphabet also has a definition or a representative name for that alphabet, for that particular letter. So the pictographs for the Hebrew alphabet are very, very interesting because if you actually read the Hebrew language, when you read a Hebrew word, the word is there, you're reading the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, and of course you can understand what the Hebrew word means. Yet if you take the time to take that word apart, literally letter by letter, every individual letter has its own definition, so to speak, and its own pictograph associated with it. So a very good example is if we look at the first three words in the Bible. In the English Bible, Genesis 1:1 starts off with the words in the beginning. Let's see, see if I can maybe show this on the screen a little bit. I don't know if this will come up well or not, but yeah, this may not come up on your screen, but in the first words in the English Bible are the words in the beginning. Now, in the Hebrew Bible, the words in the beginning is the Hebrew word bereshit. Bereshit is spelled with the letters Bet, Resh, Alf, Shin, Yod, and Tav. So just as you spell out a word, bereshit, you can spell in the Hebrew alphabet. But if you take a look at each one of those letters in the word bereshit, and you look at not only the pictograph for each of those letters, but if you look at the definition or the meaning in every one of those pictographs, the word bereshit, if you look at the definition, actually means the Son of God, his hand consumed on a cross. It literally says that in the very beginning of the Bible. So you asked earlier, what does the word nazah mean? Well, the word nazah, we can most readily see, we can most readily see it here in Isaiah chapter 52, verse 15. The word nazah, the definition of the word really refers to a sprinkling. But if you break down the word nazah, the letters in the Hebrew alphabet actually mean, for the word nazah, behold, the heir to the throne pierced. Does that sound like anyone you know? So, the Bible itself, I love the way the Bible itself always confirms and reconfirms what it's giving to the reader and what it says to you. And that can be not only from the Old Testament, but into the New Testament as well. We've always said that the Old Testament is the New Testament concealed, and the New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. And if you really look at the two together, there are so many striking examples whereby that which will occur in the New Testament is very clearly foretold and outlined in the Old Testament. I mean, back in the Old Testament, David actually, in great detail, explains and expresses what the process of crucifixion is like and what it does to a human body. And David did this 700 years before the process of crucifixion was ever even invented, so to speak. So it's amazing the way the Bible always confirms itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're in the beginning and the description of that, and then for the word nazah, and then taking that out of Isaiah. Isaiah for me is, if I had to pick five books of the Bible, it would be the four Gospels and Isaiah. And
Yes,
Isaiah is so powerful to me. So much has been foretold. Obviously, there's also some foretelling in other books of the Bible and Ezekiel, and you actually mention and go through a lot of those in the book Nazah. And but really, Isaiah, I think, is to your point, is the New Testament concealed and then the Old Testament revealed, and Isaiah as the precursor, and then the Gospels themselves certainly as the core of Jesus's message.
yes,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I didn't until I read the book, didn't realize the pictographics of the language. When I think about pictographs and then even hieroglyphics on the Egyptian side, I never really would have put those together. How did all of that come together, and how did you see that, and how did you and I guess Ken as well work towards that and pick out the different pieces of it? Because that studying the Old Testament and putting all of the Old Testament together, there's a lot there, and
absolutely.
that must have been really a labor of love. I can imagine.
Very much so. I can't speak for Ken. I can say that I know that Ken has done this for so many decades, and his breadth as well as depth of his biblical knowledge is just extreme. And he has truly studied and researched this for so many decades. Speaking for myself, when I years ago when I first learned of things like the pictographs in the Hebrew alphabet, I just found it so intriguing. It drew me more and more to study and to better understand this thing we call the Bible and what's really written in it, and just how powerful not only the words, but what it's actually telling you, how powerful it is.
Yeah, yeah, and I've not gotten into Hebrew. I certainly with Greek in the New Testament, I it and not that I've really learned anything. I mean, you go back to like a lexicon to try and look up the words, and it just taking the Greek in the New Testament and adding that extra layer of definition to what you read in the New Testament has just been phenomenal. And then to your point here about Nazah, the word Nazah, and then the word or words Bereshit, that's just absolutely fascinating.
Yes, yes, it is. It is indeed.
So now the actual title of the book is not just Nazah, it is the sprinkling of the blood, I
Yes.
think. Yeah.
It's Nazar, White Linen and the Blood of the Sprinkling is the full title of the book. And the book itself is available through Amazon. And so I heartily encourage everyone to get a copy of the book Nazar. In fact, I do happen to have a copy here. Here is essentially what the book will look like.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see by Dr. Kenneth Stevenson. So I very much encourage people to grab a copy of this book. It is available through Amazon, and it's just such a fascinating read and such a fascinating study. Ken does an excellent job of relating the factual input from the Bible and tying it together with what actually occurred from the Old Testament into the New, and giving you such an in-depth and positive exploration of the Hebrew language, what some of the words mean, the pictographs, etc. So I find that just very interesting, and everyone to whom I've spoken has just really loved the book Nazah.
Yeah, no, and I found it to be exactly like you're saying. I enjoyed, and I don't know, maybe I'm just weird like that, but I enjoyed seeing all of the different definitions as that could be possibly read into different
Yes,
phrases and different words. And I think that as you study, when you first read the Bible, whether it's the New or the Old Testament, you kind of get the overall picture, and then you kind of you do a second read and a third read and a fourth read, and then this is kind of like the advanced read, and not that it's hard to read, nothing like that, but it's kind of the advanced read to get that next level of meaning out of the reading of the Old Testament and the Hebrew that's underneath that.
absolutely, absolutely. You know, another word which we've all heard is the word Yahweh, and in Hebrew, if you look at the letters that comprise that word and look at their pictographs and the definitions, the letters for Yahweh actually mean hand, behold, nail, behold. So even the
Mm-hmm.
word Yahweh, God is saying, yes, my son's going to have a nail through his hand and be crucified. So
Mm.
it all ties together.
Yep, yep, it really does. So again, let me maybe reiterate. What do you see as the primary message that you want people to come away with when they get done reading Nazar?
With Nazar, I really hope people come away with a better understanding and a much greater level of comfort with the greater depths of the Bible and what it actually shares with you. Because I'm glad, very much glad that you mentioned earlier, Guy, that the book is very great in its level of detail, but it is not at all intimidating. I don't want people to feel like they really need to understand
Agreed.
the Hebrew
Yep,
language, or
yep,
I really need a background in theology or a strong background in science or anything. That simply is not the case. The book is very informative, but it's also extremely readable, and it's also a very enjoyable read. It's the kind of thing you will read and you'll say, "Wow, that was good," and you go back and wind up reading parts of it over and over again to really get it.
yeah, yeah. And just the way you explained, the meaning of in the beginning, Bereshit, and what it actually means through the pictographs, that explanation and that really is something that, first of all, as soon as you see it, you go, "Wow, that is just incredible." Never knew that. Never would have thought about that. And yet, how that, like you said, how that then connects the Old Testament to the New Testament, and that it, like I said, I found it very easy to read, and I definitely learned quite a bit from it. So
Yes.
kudos to you guys to have put that together.
Well, thank you. Yes, even in our newer book, The Shroud of Turin, the perfect summary, we go quite a bit into in depth and in detail on the pictographs and the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and we really do a very thorough job of explaining it. And again, guys, you mentioned anyone with even zero background, I mean, absolute zero background in biblical studies, or even if you've never read the Bible, you can literally look at it and say, "Hey, this just makes perfect sense. I get it."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So before we close, any other messages you'd like to get across? Anything interesting you're working on, or any new insights over and above what you have in the perfect summary and also in the Nazar book?
Well, a couple of things. As I mentioned, for our book, The Shroud of Turin, The Perfect Summary, it currently is available in English, in Hebrew, in Spanish, and in Italian. And as I stated, you can get any of those versions for free. You simply go to our website at www.theshroudofturin, TURIN.org/free book, FREEBOOK. We also have our Facebook groups page available. I would very much encourage all of our viewers to take a look at our Facebook page. The Facebook page is at facebook.com/perfect summary, or the groups page is facebook.com/groups, GROUPS/perfect summary. And that page is being updated constantly, giving you a lot of really good, strong information, not only on our book, but on a lot of other excellent books available out there. Guy, you noticed that we had highlighted we were very happy and proud to
Yes,
highlight your book one there as well. So great
thank
information
you
that you
so much.
provide to everyone. Thank you. And we also have our own YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is quite interesting because we also include videos of presentations given by Dr. Kenneth Stevenson at various locations throughout the year, and even some of his television presentations from the old TBN and Trinity networks, I believe. So if you want to check out some of those videos, our channel at YouTube is www.youtube.com/ the @perfect summary. So it's
Hmm.
youtube.com/@perfect summary. And so those are the main items I'd like to point out to everyone, and hope everyone takes advantage of the information that's available out there.
Yeah, and I definitely encourage everyone to read, especially the Nazar book, because it definitely sheds totally new light on how the Old Testament and the New Testament really come together, and then like Brian said, these pictographs and just bringing that out as a new dimension in studying the Old Testament is really just absolutely fascinating, and I really enjoyed that. So thank you, and thank you to Ken as well. And otherwise, Brian, thank you so much. It was really great to have you on, and really appreciate that you were able to participate. And just as a reminder, go to the Shroud of Turin.org. Turin is Turin.org. It sounded like your Facebook page is facebook.com/@ the perfect summary.
Perfect summary, not the
perfect summary without the.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a YouTube, which was youtube.com, and correct me on that one as well.
Well, okay, the Facebook page is www.facebook.com/perfect summary. No @ there for Facebook, just www.facebook.com/perfect summary. Or the Facebook groups page is facebook.com/the word groups, GROUPS/perfect summary. So that's our Facebook groups page. And the YouTube page again is www.youtube.com/@perfect summary. I would like to share one other piece of interesting information. Our book, The Shroud of Turin, The Perfect Summary, was launched and made publicly available January 1st of 2023. So in 6 months, as of today, we have about 1,000 people worldwide reading the book. The book is being read in 57 countries worldwide already. We're very happy about that. So 57 countries worldwide, and we're currently being read in every state in the United States of America and the District of Columbia, with the exception of, except for South Dakota, New Hampshire, and Vermont. So if you're in South Dakota, New Hampshire, or Vermont, please make sure you go out and get a copy of our book at the Shroud of Turin, TURIN.org/free book, FREEBOOK.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to have to work on those states, that's for sure.
Yes.
We'll get them going. I know they're going to want to read it. It's really valuable, and it really does summarize what's going on with the Shroud of Turin, and then of course Nazah, and what it's doing to give further meaning to the writings in the Old Testament. So with that, again, thank you so much, Brian. Please stay tuned for many other videos in this series of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. Please visit GuyPowell.com and sign up for more episodes. And we've been giving out and promoting things, so I'm going to promote my book, The Only Witness, A History of the Shroud of Turin. Please go to Amazon and read it. And if you do read it, you can read it on Kindle or here in a print version. Please give it a review. And that'll be very good to get some of the key messages out about Jesus, about the Shroud, and about how Christianity formed over the last couple thousand years. Brian, thank you so much.
Guy, thank you again for having me. Appreciate your time. It's always good to see you.
Thank you.